Why might the Iowa Senate stay out of that debate over whether insurance companies should reimburse providers for both in-person and virtual mental health services the same? Should owning two vehicles disqualify a family from getting food stamps? And what is the relationship like between the top Iowa Senate Republican and the top Iowa House Republican? Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver will be here to answer those. Plus, an Iowa racial equality advocate explains why justice accountability has not arrived yet. And in the Insider's Quick Six, take one possible 2022 contender for Congress off the list.
From your local election headquarters, this is the Insiders with Dave Price.
The Iowa legislative session is now down to its final few weeks, maybe. There's a budget agreement still to get, how and where to spend that federal COVID-19 stimulus money, and some other matters to figure out. But we do know that April 30th is the last day lawmakers would receive their daily allowance, so that may mean something. I asked Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver about one of Governor Kim Reynolds' priorities, and that's to convince the reluctant to get one of those COVID-19 vaccines.
For the entire last year, we've been wanting to get back to normal. And one of the keys to getting back to normal is to get enough people vaccinated to have herd immunity. And so certainly we want as many people as possible to get vaccinated. Those that are willing and able. Some people just don't want to because of different beliefs. Some people maybe can't because of different conditions. But we certainly want as many people vaccinated as possible.
So which one are you?
I have not got vaccinated yet. Just throughout session, I've said we need to let the more vulnerable people get the vaccination first, and so just haven't done it throughout session.
Are you fundamentally against it, or do you think you'll do it?
No, I will get it. My mom will make sure I get it,
yeah. Your mom will make sure. All right, hey, will you talk about this session? It's just such a different one where you have obviously with COVID is its own thing, but the federal funding side of this, these aid packages that they put in, but there are certain part of these things were passed last year, signed into law last year, and you still don't know all the rules about where you can spend this. So how do you do that when you're planning out a budget? Because that's one of the biggest things you have left here these final weeks of session.
Well, one of the great luxuries we have, at least from a state budget perspective, is we're not upside down. We ended last year, even through the pandemic, with a surplus, over $300 million. And so there's a lot of states that have been begging for that federal money just to patch holes in their budget. We're not in that position. We certainly understand there are people, there are industries that need help, and that's where we want to use that money. But because we're strong fiscally as a state, we've been able to kind of take our time and make sure that the rules and the guidance that come with that money can be followed. And that's a big thing, is we want to make sure that whatever that money is spent on, it's following the rules and guidance so we don't have to pay it back later.
For the most part, are you all going to likely just pass a budget, use existing money that you think you have coming in, and the federal stuff will be figured out later?
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and I think that's the most appropriate way to do it, because we can pass our state budget as normal with the current funds that we have and then take time to find out that guidance. I think a lot of the people that voted on that bill in Congress still don't even know what's in that bill. And so sorting through that and making sure we spend it properly, I think is the appropriate way to go.
Okay, talk about the broadband expansion the governor wants. So she wants $450 million over 3 years. It looks like you all have settled on 100 for now. So what does that mean going forward?
So we did make a $100 million investment this year, and that's a perfect example of what we just talked about with federal money. There's a lot of states that are looking at using some of that money for infrastructure and specifically broadband. We might do that, but we want to make sure that before we go spend $200 or $300 million on broadband, that it's appropriate with the federal guidance. And so that's a perfect example of, we want to use our state money right now, but next year or the year after, as we try to finish out that proposal from the governor, that's a possibility where we can use federal money.
That is so much money that is still uncertain from the federal side, and you are hoping, I'm sure your members are hoping, to get out of there in the next couple of weeks and wrap up. Would you all potentially have to come back? Or any allocation, or can the governor handle all this?
Well, to this point, the governor has handled all that, working very closely with us. And we have a great relationship with both the governor and the House, where we can bring ideas, talk about those ideas, and let her handle most of that. If we wanted to do that as a legislature right now, to spend almost $2 billion is really hard to do appropriately in a short amount of time. And so we either have to freeze it and do it in January or come back later. With the relationship we have with the governor and the trust we have in her, we'd prefer to just work with her that way.
Before the session started, there were some members in both chambers on your side who were concerned that the governor may be going too far with her executive authority dealing with the virus. It doesn't seem like that's really been a big thing this session. So have those concerns been kind of calmed?
Well, I would say that
and I'm not saying you had that.
Yeah, there's been no more difficult job in America the last year than being a governor of a state, and we certainly support the tough decisions that she's had to make every single day with sometimes very little information on that she needs to make those decisions. And so there may be a time to look at our executive powers. In the middle of the pandemic, we just decided it is not the appropriate time to do that.
The governor had said that it is the president's problem where particularly these children, migrant children that have come across the border, and it is not the state's place here to take in and house, whether it's temporary or permanently here. As you know, people will bring up what Governor Ray did back in the 1970s, welcoming in refugees. Back then was the only governor in the country to do it at the time. So do you agree with the governor that it's not the state's place?
Well, I think
families are willing to take in these kids?
Well, I think she also said that we have a lot of foster kids that we have problems just finding homes for them and making sure that's run appropriately. So before we bring more people up from the border, we want to make sure the Iowans that are here are taken care of. And I think that's a really important point because in the legislature, we hear a lot of complaints, issues, concerns in just the foster care program itself. We want to make sure that's addressed before we bring more people into that system.
So you would be fine with the governor's position is fine with you?
Yeah, I support her in that decision. Yeah.
All right, what about this, there's this bill that talks about and it's essentially welfare reform, if you will, food stamp reform here, but if you have two vehicles, you may not be able to get food assistance. Explain why that would be necessary.
Well, the bill that we've been working on for several years now is meant to cut out waste, fraud, and abuse out of our public assistance programs. I think politicians for 30 years have said, we don't want any waste, fraud, and abuse. No one's ever done anything about it. I mean, people have probably been on your show saying that same thing. Nobody does anything about it, but Senate Republicans have stood up the last 3 or 4 years and say, that's what we want too. We want to make sure that those funds for public assistance are going to people that qualify for them. There's technology now that can instantly determine whether you qualify or not. That's what this bill is about, is getting that instant information to know if you qualify and you're using the programs properly. And so we think it makes sense. We've had it on the floor. We have it in budgets. We think it's important to get done.
So does it go by assets or what? I think some of the concern was, all right, if you have a family and they have two clunkers at home, two cars that are worth almost nothing, are they going to be knocked out of this?
We don't want to change the rules. These are federal programs administered by the state. So whatever the federal program and rules are, we want to follow that, but we want to make sure that we can test the assets or test the qualifications instantly, and that's what these programs would do.
So it'd be a dollar thing. Total assets, am I following you right?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the federal, there's different programs, so whatever the federal qualifications would be is what we want to follow.
All right, what about this idea with mental health? So there's the fight about whether if I go seek treatments in person with you or if I do it virtually, and should insurance companies pay the same here? What's going to be the agreement on this?
Well, as a small government type of person, we ideally want the private sector to work that out. We want the providers to work with the insurance companies and figure out what rate makes sense for both of them. That's how it works in almost every other area. And typically the legislature won't come in and say, you shall pay this amount. And so the preferred path from Senate Republicans is let the private entities figure that out. And I think
just stay out of it.
And both sides have come to the table and I think worked in good faith because they know that we could pass a law saying it has to be exactly equal, but they're working through numbers to figure out what makes sense for both providers and insurance companies, and we think that's the preferred path.
The governor proposed a series of reforms dealing with law enforcement, dealing with racial profiling. As of now, as we sit here, most of the Back the Blue side of this would be more focused on punishing protesters who commit violence, but would not have the racial profiling section of that. Why is that not going to make it through?
Well, last June, as you remember, we passed one of the only states in the country, I think, at the time that passed a social justice type of bill. We did that very quickly in just a couple days. As we went through the summer and saw more and more protests and assaults on police officers and so forth, our caucus decided we wanted to focus on what we ran on in the campaigns, which is backing the blue. And so that's why most of those issues have come through the legislative process.
And why not do what else the governor wanted here?
That was just decisions made by our members as it's going through the process that we ran on Back in the Blue. They wanted to come down and keep that promise.
Now, others are still hoping to see more changes here. When we come back, the founder of Des Moines Selma on why Officer Derek Chauvin's conviction of George Floyd's murder is significant, but not enough.